This is Brian of Gunkel Tarot, and today I am going to do a video response to Simon of the Hermit's Caves recent video of my oldest decks. The first deck I purchased was my first copy of the Morgan Greer. This one, Morgan Greer, was published in 1979. I purchased this copy in 1980, and it was still being printed by Morgan Press. The little white book has Morgan and Morgan, and the cardstock is approximately 1/8 of an inch wider than the US Games version, as they printed it ever since they acquired the deck. This is my first deck. This one is now reserved for my personal readings, and I very shortly after that acquired a second copy of it, which I'll get to in a second. The second deck I purchased was the Aquarian Tarot, which was published in either 1968 or 1970. I've seen both dates used. Again, I would have purchased it in 1980. It came down to the States with me, but it was eventually rehomed to someone who truly appreciated the deck and its artwork. My third deck purchased was my second copy of the Morgan Greer. Again, the Morgan and Morgan Press version, slightly wider. The little white book, 1979, I guess pretty good shape considering. I do not have the original boxes for any of my older decks. When I started reading tarot, I had a small quantity of decks. I don't know other people, but I certainly didn't imagine I would ever have as many as a dozen decks, much less the 5 dozen tarot and non-tarot oracle that I have. So I didn't save the tuck boxes. I wrapped them in fabric and have since put them into wooden boxes. So then my fourth deck was the Sacred Rose limited edition majors only deck. It was published in 1980. The mass market full 78 card deck, published 2 years later. The mass market deck does not have the gilding that this one has. I did purchase a copy of the mass market deck, but not until I moved to Ohio, and it was this century. So again, this is the majors only. The artwork itself is identical. It's the trim would be the only difference, and the fact that it came in the wooden box. And from the same time period of the deck, but not acquired at that time, was the book called The Guide to the Sacred Rose Tarot. It is long out of print. I purchased this one for close to $30, used but in very good condition, and consider myself blessed to have it at that price, because it's not often available at any price. So then the fifth deck I purchased, which I also no longer have, is the Medieval Scapini 1985 first printing. It is no longer fully in my possession. I used it for one of my Gunkel Post mailings, so it's not part of my collection anymore. So that was the fifth deck. Then the next 3 decks I acquired are non-tarot decks. This is the Sacred Path Oracle deck, which came as a kit with this hardcover book. I believe the deck is still available. I don't know that the book is hardcover. 1990. It's 44 cards, 3 by 5.5 inch. I don't use them often, but I still do use them. And again, that was my 6th deck with purchasing the medicine cards. This again is an early edition. This was published by Bear and Company in Santa Fe. Book is 1988 copyright. One of the co-authors is the same person who did the previous deck I showed you. This deck is now available from US Games. It has the original 44, but instead of having these blank cards for us to add our own animals to, I believe they have animals on them now. I think it still comes in a hardcover book. The last time I saw it, it was a purple cover, but still hardcover. So again, 1988 for that one. And the last one that I acquired last century before moving down to Ohio is the Lakota Sweat Lodge cards. 50 cards, 1994. The book is not in terrible shape. The cards, they do have some bowing. The artwork is wonderful, and it's a very thorough system. In the book is a lot of information, and I have absolutely not clicked with it, and it's the one waiting to be rehomed for an incredibly nominal price. And I do have some honorable mentions. The Solobusco Majors Only reprint, obviously, and this is included in the wonderful book, it's not all going to fit in, The History of Tarot Art by Holly and Esser of the Wildly Tarot podcast. So again, it's a reprint of the Solobusco. I believe it's the oldest complete tarot deck. It's certainly the oldest complete with illustrated minors. The other honorable mention is the Sheridan Douglas Tarot. This is a reprint, 2006. It's called the second edition of the 1972 deck. And as I understand it, there are minimal changes, perhaps just cleaning up the artwork. It was limited edition and not available when I started reading tarot, and in all honesty, I would not have looked at this and considered it something that I would use. I did early on in my tarot studies pick up the book that goes with the deck, although I did not have the deck. I did take the book as an interesting alternative to my other tarot books, which I will show you in a second. And again, looking at that cover, I was not that interested in it. First published 1972. This is a 1979 reprint. I know it's been reprinted since then in a different format, and Simon has done a walkthrough, or at least a look at the newer version of it. So that's an honorable mention. As I mentioned, that book was an interesting juxtaposition. The other books that I had available, I don't recall Mary Greer's books being available, although perhaps just not in the shops where I was shopping back then. So these are my first books. The Tarot Revealed from 1960 and Mastering the Tarot from 1971. Two of the three books by Eden Gray that were published in this form of paperback. And Eden Gray is a pseudonym for an actress whose name I'm blanking on. And certainly as tarot books go, they were not much more than Little White Books in a lot of ways. Illustrations, of course, are the Rider-Waite-Smith drawings. Some bit of a description, although you'll see in the minors very little. Mastering the Tarot, very similar, a little more material. It certainly was a good way to start, because at least then I had something to go with the Morgan Greer decks that I started with. And so that shows or mentions my original 8 decks and earliest tarot books from the 80s and 90s, and well, some honorable mention of some reprints of older material that I acquired more recently. And I hope you enjoyed this short 12-minute video.